Welcome to our lecture on medical devices classifications in regulatory affairs with an overview of FDA, Health Canada, and EU systems. Product classification is a cornerstone of regulatory affairs strategy. It directly affects the regulatory pathway, the type and extent of safety and efficacy data required, and the performance standards that must be met. Different authorities, FDA, Health Canada, and EU MDR, have unique classification frameworks that define requirements based on device risk level. Early understanding of these classification systems is critical for regulatory planning, resource allocation, clinical strategy, and development timelines. Misclassification or misunderstanding can lead to delays, additional studies, and increased costs. This module provides a comprehensive guide to the classification systems used in key markets and illustrates how to leverage classification knowledge strategically in medical device development. By the end of this module, participants should be able to explain and compare the classification frameworks of FDA, Health Canada, and the EU. They will understand how classification affects regulatory requirements, including the level of clinical evidence, safety testing, and performance standards. Participants will learn to apply this knowledge to select appropriate regulatory pathways and to strategically plan product development. Through case scenarios, learners will analyze practical examples demonstrating how classification impacts multi-jurisdictional submissions and regulatory decision-making, fostering a more efficient development and approval process. The FDA classifies medical devices into three main categories based on risk and controls necessary to assure safety and effectiveness. Class 1 devices, such as bandages, examination gloves, and handheld instruments, are considered low risk and primarily subject to general controls including registration, listing, and good manufacturing practices, GMP. Class 2 devices, including infusion pumps, powered wheelchairs, and surgical needles, are moderate risk and require both general controls and special controls such as performance standards and post-market surveillance. Class 3 devices, such as heart valves, implantable pacemakers, and breast implants, present high risk and require general controls plus pre-market approval, PMA, with substantial clinical evidence demonstrating safety and effectiveness. Understanding these classifications is crucial for determining regulatory strategy, clinical requirements, and the level of oversight needed for market approval. Health Canada employs a four-tier system for medical device classification. Class 1 devices, such as reusable surgical instruments, are considered the lowest risk and primarily require a Medical Device Establishment License, MDL. Class 2 devices, like contact lenses and pregnancy test kits, are low-moderate risk and require both an MDL and a Medical Device License, MDL. Class 3 devices, including orthopedic implants and glucose monitors, are moderate-high risk, necessitating an MDL plus MDL with supporting safety and effectiveness data. Class 4 devices, such as pacemakers and HIV test kits, are highest risk, requiring an MDL and MDL with extensive clinical evidence. Accurate classification is vital for ensuring the appropriate regulatory path is followed and that required evidence is generated for timely approval in Canada. The EU Medical Device Regulation, MDR, classifies devices into four categories. Class 1 devices, like simple bandages and tongue depressors, are low risk and often self-certified, with some exceptions. Class II devices, including hearing aids and dental fillings, are medium-low risk and require notified body assessment of technical documentation. Class IIB devices, such as ventilators and bone fixation plates, are medium-high risk, requiring notified body assessment plus quality management system audits. Class 3 devices, including heart valves and spinal implants, are high risk and require comprehensive assessment by a notified body along with clinical evaluation. Understanding EU classification is essential for planning conformity assessment, clinical evaluation, and market entry strategies across European markets. Safety requirements are determined largely by device classification. Lower-risk devices, such as FDA Class 1 or EU Class 1, may require only bench testing, biocompatibility assessment, and limited clinical data. Higher-risk devices, including FDA Class 3 or EU Class 3, necessitate extensive safety testing, rigorous clinical trials, long-term follow-up studies, and robust post-market surveillance. Regulatory authorities evaluate whether the device meets established safety standards, and higher-risk classifications trigger more stringent oversight. Integrating safety requirements with classification ensures that development teams generate sufficient evidence to demonstrate safety and satisfy regulatory expectations in each target market. The burden of proof for efficacy increases with device risk classification. FDA Class 1 devices are generally exempt from efficacy demonstrations, whereas Class 2 devices must show substantial equivalence to predicate devices via the 510(k) pathway. Class 3 devices require pre-market approval, PMA, supported by clinical trials demonstrating safety and effectiveness. In the EU, Class 3 devices require clinical investigations and clinical evaluation reports, which provide detailed evidence of device performance. Proper planning and early integration of efficacy demonstration requirements help ensure regulatory compliance, efficient submissions, and minimize development delays across jurisdictions. Product classification dictates which performance standards apply. International standards, such as ISO and IEC, provide baseline requirements for safety, performance, and quality. Regional standards, including EN standards in Europe, provide additional context-specific requirements. Recognized consensus standards may be referenced for regulatory compliance. In the United States, FDA special controls define performance requirements for specific Class 2 devices, including testing protocols, labeling, and post-market surveillance obligations. Understanding applicable standards ensures devices meet regulatory expectations and reduces the risk of non-compliance or product recalls. This case involves a continuous glucose monitoring system with smartphone integration. The FDA classifies the device as Class 2, requiring a 510(k) submission with special controls. Health Canada classifies it as Class 3, requiring a medical device license with supporting data, while the EU MDR classifies it as Class IIB, requiring notified body assessment. A strategic approach begins with FDA submission using predicate devices to demonstrate substantial equivalence, leveraging this data for Health Canada submission, while concurrently preparing additional clinical evidence for EU MDR compliance. Cross-jurisdictional planning ensures that development, clinical testing, and documentation satisfy requirements for all target markets, enabling an efficient and compliant regulatory strategy. An implantable neural stimulator for chronic pain management is high risk across all jurisdictions. FDA classifies it as Class 3, requiring PMA with extensive clinical trials. Health Canada classifies it as Class 4, necessitating a medical device license with extensive clinical evidence. EU MDR classifies it as Class 3, requiring notified body assessment and clinical evaluation. A comprehensive clinical trial program designed to meet all jurisdictions' requirements is essential. Prioritizing submissions to the FDA, followed by EU and Health Canada, ensures data can be leveraged across markets. Documentation, safety monitoring, and trial design must account for cross-border regulatory expectations. A surgical instrument with integrated AI guidance combines hardware and software components, impacting regulatory classification. FDA classifies the hardware as Class 2, 510(k), but the AI software may require additional review depending on functionality. Health Canada considers it Class 3, requiring MDL with supporting evidence. EU MDR may classify the device as Class IIB or Class 3, depending on AI functionality and clinical risk. Strategic submissions separate hardware and software where feasible, and comprehensive validation protocols for the AI algorithm are implemented to satisfy all jurisdictions. Cross-functional coordination between R&D, regulatory, and clinical teams ensures compliance and efficient market entry. The pre-development phase sets the foundation for regulatory compliance. Activities include market analysis, needs assessment, preliminary device classification, regulatory strategy planning, and standards identification. These steps ensure that the device concept aligns with regulatory expectations and helps anticipate required clinical evidence, performance testing, and documentation. Early planning prevents delays, ensures proper resource allocation, and reduces risk of non-compliance throughout subsequent development phases. During the development phase, teams translate user needs into detailed design inputs and specifications, implement risk management activities, and develop prototypes. Verification and validation testing confirm that design outputs meet requirements and intended uses. Manufacturing processes are also developed and validated to ensure consistent quality. Adhering to regulatory requirements at this stage reduces downstream non-compliance, facilitates multi-jurisdictional approvals, and ensures device safety and effectiveness. In the pre-submission phase, regulatory authorities are engaged early to clarify requirements. Technical files or design dossiers are prepared, clinical evaluation reports are finalized, and QMS processes are implemented. This ensures that the submission package is complete, compliant, and meets the expectations of FDA, Health Canada, and EU MDR. Thorough preparation at this stage accelerates regulatory review and minimizes questions or requests for additional data. The submission phase involves formal applications to regulatory authorities. FDA 510(k) submissions undergo a 3 to 6 month review. EU MDR technical documentation is assessed by a notified body over 6 to 9 months, and Health Canada applications are reviewed within 4 to 7 months. Timely and thorough responses to regulatory queries are critical for maintaining review timelines and achieving approval. Coordinated submissions across jurisdictions allow leveraging of clinical and technical evidence to optimize efficiency and reduce redundant work. After regulatory approval, post-approval activities ensure ongoing compliance, safety, and product readiness. Manufacturing scale-up ensures production capacity meets market demand while maintaining quality. Post-market surveillance programs monitor device performance and identify any safety issues. Commercial launch activities and ongoing regulatory monitoring ensure the device remains compliant and competitive. This phase closes the loop from development to commercialization, supporting patient safety and organizational success. Safety and efficacy requirements scale with device risk. Lower-risk devices may require limited bench and biocompatibility testing, while higher-risk devices demand extensive clinical trials and long-term follow-up. The efficacy burden is heavier for high-risk devices, necessitating rigorous proof of performance and effectiveness. Integrating testing requirements with classification early ensures alignment with regulatory expectations, reduces the risk of delays, and informs development strategy. Device classification determines which performance standards apply. International ISO and IEC standards provide fundamental guidance, while regional EN standards offer additional compliance expectations. Consensus standards and special controls, particularly under FDA, define specific testing and documentation requirements. Compliance with applicable standards ensures the device meets regulatory expectations, reduces risk of non-compliance, and supports safety and efficacy claims. Strategic regulatory planning starts with early classification assessment to determine the appropriate pathway in each jurisdiction. Subsequent planning aligns submissions, clinical studies, and manufacturing processes with regulatory expectations. Risk mitigation strategies are implemented to address potential gaps in safety, efficacy, and compliance. Aligning regulatory strategy with clinical and manufacturing plans ensures efficient development, minimizes delays, and optimizes the likelihood of multi-jurisdictional approval. Understanding product classification is essential for successful regulatory strategy. Classification impacts safety testing, efficacy demonstrations, performance standards, and submission pathways. Accurate early assessment guides resource allocation, clinical planning, and regulatory submissions across multiple jurisdictions. A well-informed classification strategy reduces risk, prevents delays, and optimizes the pathway to market, ensuring that medical devices reach patients efficiently and safely while maintaining regulatory compliance.